Well, thank you, Lauren. Hello. Yes, my name is Paul. I'm a docent here at the California State Railroad Museum, and I want to welcome you to the cab forward locomotive. Just take a look at the size and length of this locomotive. One of the largest that ever operated on the West Coast. Certainly one of the largest in the United States that was ever built. Let's walk the length of the locomotive here and just again marvel at the size and the immensity of this. This locomotive weighs slightly over 1 million pounds. Many people come to the museum and they say, I want to see that 1 million pound locomotive. Well, this is it right here. Also, it had the power of about 6,000 horsepower, which was a very, very powerful locomotive for its time. Well, let's walk around and take a look at the front of the locomotive and talk about this. Notice the locomotive might look backwards to you. We have the cab in front. That's why this is called the cab forward or the cab ahead. Cab was in front for the reason that when this locomotive was used, it went through snow sheds and tunnels, about 37 miles of those, and so much steam and smoke came out of the stack in the normal configuration that steam and smoke was forced into the cab and made it very, very uncomfortable. Let me describe a little bit differently here. Take a look at the locomotive next to us here, the Sonoma. The Sonoma locomotive is more normal configuration. We have the smokestack in front, long boiler, and then the cab. Locomotive here, the cab forward. Notice what's above me here, big windows. This is the cab, the area where the engineer and fireman and sometimes brakeman and conductor would sit. And then behind them is the boiler and the smokestack, all done so that the steam and smoke coming out of the stack would be behind them when they were going through the snow sheds and tunnels going up and over Donner Pass, because that's where this locomotive was initially first used, up and over Donner Pass. Very high climb, lots of hard work that it needed to do. And the locomotive was used because it could replace several earlier locomotives. This is so powerful, it would replace upwards of 3 locomotives going up and over Donner Pass, or the hill as it was called. So let's walk up these steps and go into the cab, tell you a few other stories about the locomotive. This particular one was built in 1944. Last of the cab forwards built. First one, 1909. Now, when they did this first operation of the locomotive and they realized they had this problem with the steam and smoke, somebody recognized and remembered that the North Pacific Coast Railroad in 1900 had actually built a backwards locomotive with the cab in front. So in 1909, a fellow by the name of Taylor Hinselman, who was the head of motive power here at the Southern Pacific shop, reversed the order of this particular locomotive, changed the configuration, and it was so successful, they ultimately built 256 of these locomotives, this being the very last one built in the middle of World War II, 1944. Well, let's walk into the cab and see what it looks like there. Once again, thank you for being with us. You can come here and visit us sometime, and you too can do what I'm going to do here, which you get to be the engineer of this really large locomotive. Very exciting thing to do. Step on in, watch your head. All right, folks, here on this side of the locomotive is where the engineer sits. Let's take a look at some of the basic controls that an engineer has to make the locomotive work. Clearly, you want the locomotive to go forwards and backwards. Sometimes you have to make it stop. Look at this long handle here with a grip on the bottom. This is the throttle valve. This is what makes the locomotive move, because you move this back and forth, and it'll put steam on the pistons, and that makes the locomotive move. Well, because you got a throttle valve, which is much like a gas pedal, you better have a brake pedal. So let's take a look at these 2 levers here. There are actually 2 brake levers on a steam engine. This one right here is known as the independent or the locomotive brake. Works just the locomotive, because sometimes it operates by itself. Over here, we have this big brass handle here. This is known as the train brake, because you got maybe 99 cars behind you, all with their own set of brakes. And so you operate those brakes by turning this handle here. This one does just the locomotive. Now, what happens if you get to the end of the track and you got to go backwards? Well, that's this right here. This is the forward reversing lever. Operate this one way or the other, and the locomotive will change direction. So that's what you get to do as the engineer. You get to control speed and direction. Now, the other thing you get to do is really, really important. This is what I like to point out to the kids. Take a look at this handle right here. What is this? And well, I have kids coming to the cab forward. I have them try to work out this word. What is that? W-H-I-S-T-L-E. And they work it out. What? Whistle. I go, right, that's the whistle. Just push that down and see what it does. Oh, sadly, nothing, because we don't have any steam pressure at the moment. But I say, hey, let's make some noise. So we push it down. Woo! Woo, that's it. That's what the engineer gets to do. Operate the whistle, make it go forward. Now, here's what the engineer also gets to do. Left hand on the throttle valve, left hand on the brakes, left hand on the forward reversing lever. What do you suppose you do with your right hand? I'll tell you what, you stick it out the window and wave at the kids because that's what they expect you to do when they see this big locomotive going down the track. Well, let's take a look at the other position here. Would be the fireman's position, fire person right over here on this side. Now, in a steam engine, steam locomotive like this one is, the engineer is always on the right-hand side in the normal direction of travel. Fireman is on the left-hand side, normal direction of travel. Now, if you're familiar with locomotives, this may appear backwards to you. Well, it is backwards because this is a sort of a backwards locomotive. Remember, it's configured differently. Cab is in front, so they had to reverse all of the locations of where the crew that would sit would be. So over here we have the fireman side. Let's talk about what the fireman does. All right, let's take a look right here. All right. So what does fireman do? Fireman got to make a giant fire. We're going to boil water. Boil water makes steam. Steam is what makes a steam engine work. Now, how do you get more steam? How do you increase the intensity of the fire? Real simple. Look at this. Just like turning on the water for your hose in your garden. Here we have the fuel addition valve. We're burning fuel oil. Many people come here and they say, where's the coal? Well, we have to tell them we're not burning coal on the Southern Pacific Cab Forward. We are burning fuel oil. People in California and the West Coast don't really know what fuel oil is. Fuel oil sort of looks like maple syrup, real thick, brown. You got to heat it up to make it flow. So that's what happens here. Now, think about this. Would you rather move this valve back and forth, or get out a big shovel, get a shovel full of coal, throw that into the firebox, which we'll look at in just a minute? This is much easier. So this controls the fire, this controls how much heat you're going to make, but you better get water into the boiler because that's what you're going to boil off. Let's take a look at something here. I'm going to stand up. Take a look at this little shiny silver painted gauge right here. This is known as a water gauge, and it'll tell you how much water is in the boiler here. Now, you might have seen a coffee urn someplace that had a little glass tube on the bottom, and you pour a cup of coffee or punch or something, and you see the water level up and down. Same thing here. This tells you where your water level is and how much water you have. You got two ways to get water into the boiler here. You got this red handle here. This goes to a pump. It's a forward part of the boiler, and this allows more water to come into the boiler. Got this thing right here that looks like an old-fashioned automobile emergency brake. This goes to the steam injector, and that causes steam to also, water to also go into the boiler. So you always want two ways to get water into the boiler because it is a safety issue. One of the biggest problems one would have in a steam engine is running out of water, which is a dangerous situation. That's why you have a water gauge. You can always see what amount of water you have, and you have two ways of getting water. Now, notice, here's what the fireman will do. All right, looking at the steam gauge. So take a look over here. We want 250 pounds steam, always. So you're working real hard to get 250 pounds steam, which, by the way, is over 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So you're looking at the gauge is going down, more steam. See the gauge going up a little bit, less steam. I mean, less fire, less fuel. Oh, we're running out of water. We got to turn the water gauge here like this. Less fuel. You're really busy. I want you to know, look, in our case here, the window doesn't open. You're too busy to wave at the kids. That's the engineer's job to do. Let's take a look at the firebox here. Firebox is where the oil gets sprayed. And it's where you'll see the big fire. That's our simulated fire there. That's the big orange glow. And if you look all the way in the back, you see a really dark circle, has a bunch of little holes in it. Those little holes happen to be boiler tubes. And you see our little drawing that we have of the tube sheet is what it's called. These are the tubes that the hot air you're making goes through. That hot air might be 1800 degrees. It goes through those 22-foot long tubes, transfers heat to the water. As I said before, you heat that water to over 400 degrees. Now, you might be asking a question. How does water get over 400 degrees? I thought water boiled 212. That's right, 212 at sea level. But we are a pressurized boiler. We're making 250 pounds steam. And that means that it's going to be 400 degrees. Take physics in high school. Come here to the Railroad Museum. We'll explain that a little bit further for you. Well, thank you very much for being with us today here at the California State Railroad Museum and visiting me here at the Cab Forward steam locomotive, one of the largest steam engines that ever operated here on the West Coast. We will see you soon.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Thank you, Lauren.
All right, we are going to continue with our adventure here, passing through the roundhouse. And we have some more of our volunteer team ready to go this morning and welcome our visitors. Good morning. So you all just got a crash course in the jobs of fireman and engineer. We're going to take a look at another position that you might have on the railroad and check in with Don Dean over here. Good morning, Don.
Hey, good morning. My name is Don. I'm a docent here at the California State Railroad Museum. Good to see you here today. Listen, we're going to look at a very interesting car. It's called a railway post office car. Now, railway was hauling mail across the country, starting clear back, well, after the Civil War. And by 1838, in fact, the Congress had authorized that every railroad would also be a postal route. So near the end of the Civil War, 1864, we actually started putting clerks onto specially designed cars. And we were sorting mail en route. And so this car, 1950, is the last group of railway post office cars to be built. So after 140 years of connecting our country coast to coast with mail, in 1918, we started using aircraft, and that was fine. But in 1971, guess what? We started using email. And email goes instantaneously. The trains go fast, but email is instantaneous. So come on, let's go inside the car. Now, this room isn't very interesting, but it's a baggage room. Seen one baggage room, you've seen them all. But we do have some interesting displays on each side that you might find worth spending some time looking at. Very interesting displays. But now we're going to go into the car. This is a 60-foot railway post office car. Now, we're going about 55 to 60 miles an hour down the track. That's a tell. And we're going to be picking up mail at a lot of little towns along the track because this fast train doesn't stop at every town. Now, these towns were spaced about 20 to 30 miles apart because back in the late 1800s, the locomotives of freight trains had to get more water for their boiler about every 2 to 2.5 hours of operation, which meant at 10 miles an hour, well, about every 20 or 30 miles, you needed to refill water. And so that's why stations were developed at that spacing. So today, our high-speed train can't stop at every little town. Why we'd never make it from one end to the other, because this particular car operated from St. Paul, Minnesota to Seattle, Washington. 1,780 miles. That's a long trip for this car. Okay, so we're going to pick up mail on the fly. We have a nice illustration here of a crane holding a mail pouch. And over here, I can show you, we have an actual mail pouch that would have been out on the crane. Very interesting, isn't it? And it's very, very durable. I mean, this canvas is so tough, it would take a lot of abuse. And it's going to get a lot of abuse. And notice on top, what do you see here? Well, this is leather, and it's going to help keep off the water and the sleet and the snow, help protect the mail that's inside. And in the center is a very tight belt here, because this is where we're going to grab the pouch while it's hanging out there next to the track. Now, when we hit it, it's going to hit with a wallop. So we don't want to jump when we hit it. And it's going to end up just like this. So it was on the crane. Now we pull the handle down, the arm goes out, and it's going to end up right here, just like this. And at the same time we snag this pouch, we have a similar pouch with mail. We toss it out the door. That's mail for that little town. So we made an exchange. We tossed out some mail for the town. We picked up some mail that the town was sending. So we're going to take this pouch down to the other end of the car where we do the sorting. You'll notice the nice wooden bins up here. This is for second-class mail. Magazines, newspapers, catalogs, and small parcels. And down below, we have 100 pouches. These pouches are all labeled and destined for different post offices, distribution stations, and connecting trains. You know, in 1950, people living in rural areas and the farmers and they didn't have big box stores and they didn't have shopping malls. So where did they get the things they needed? You know, they needed tools and they needed clothing and they needed furniture and they needed all kinds of things. Where did they get it? Well, through a catalog. And they would send in mail orders and order things and they'd come back by the train. And so there'll be a lot of orders for various things that these people need in the small towns. And this car would have a lot of orders and a lot of catalogs. Also in 1950, the rural areas, well, they, believe it or not, they had no TV. That's right. No TV in most rural areas. So to find out what's happening in the world, they were going to have to subscribe to the nearest metropolitan area newspaper, find out what's going on in the world. Also to get the scores of their favorite sports teams. What's your favorite sports team? I know you must have some. Okay, let's take the mail we just picked up. We're going to empty it down here on this end of the distribution table. And let's see what we have here. Well, goodness, you know, we had better see if any of these letters are for the next town. Because you see, we're going about 55, 60 miles an hour. Towns are only 20 miles apart. We're going to be there pretty soon. And then I get distracted talking to you. We might just whip right on through the train, through the town, and we don't want to do that. But let me see here if there's anything. Oh, here we have one letter for the next town. All letters for the next town, we're going to put at the far end of the table. Now, the rest of this mail is going to get sorted into the letter cases here. We have 744 letter cases. That's right. 744 letter cases. Well, let's see, this is 1950. Well, we don't have zip code in 1950. So we're going to have to read your handwriting. How's your handwriting? Pretty good, I hope. All right. And now, how are we going to organize things here? Well, we could organize it alphabetically, but you know, we're not. We're going to use a geographical organization because this train goes from Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, Montana, Idaho, and Washington, across the northern tier of the country. And so we're going to organize state by state all the way around here. And within each state, we have an array of post offices we'll distribute the mail to. Now, when we get 60 to 80 letters for a particular post office, here's what we're going to do. We have twine. You notice this. And this twine, we're going to use it to bundle up and send them here. You see, they're all going to the same post office, and we don't want to sort them again. Oh, here's another stack of letters. We do the same thing for this post office. Take the twine, bundle them up, and toss them in their end of the table. Now, we're going to have a clerk that's going to help us here. Down at this end of the table, he's going to take the bundles we made and toss them into the appropriate pouch for the post office that these are to go to. Look what else we have here. Letter cases, you know, these are going to have to be sorted one at a time, individually, into the correct post office pouch. Okay, well, by now we should be getting close to that next little town I was telling you about. And when we're about a mile from town, the engineer will blow his whistle. So we need to be listening for that whistle. At the same time, you can look out the windows and we can see if there's any landmarks that we recognize. Wow, let's see, we must be getting, oh, did you hear the whistle? Got to pay attention. All right, so the local clerk's going to take the letter at the far end of the table. He's going to put it in a pouch and toss it out at the next town. As he picks up the next pouch, brings it down, empties it, and we go through the same process all over again, town after town after town, where this train does not stop. Okay, so come on in here and take a look at all these letters we have on display here. These are to illustrate the various stamps that would have been on letters. And the top row is for 1950. That's when this car was built.
And you can see the postage is 3 cents. The bottom row of letters is by 1967. That's when the car went out of service. And in 1967, the postage was 6 cents. So we've gone from 3 cents to 6 cents in 17 years, 100% increase in postage. You know what it costs to mail a letter today? I'll let you look that one up. Okay, come on down here. You know, when you came in here, why we locked the doors at each end of the car. We can't have people walking through the post office. Well, not even the railroad people can come through the post office. That's right. And so you're going to be in here 8 to 12 hours with your team sorting mail. 8 to 12 hours. Well, you're going to get hungry in 8 to 12 hours. Come on down. I'll show you our kitchen. So remember, we're part of a passenger train, and passenger trains have steam. So we've tapped into the steam line, and we have a steam cooker here. That's right. And listen, we're going to heat up something for lunch today. How does that look to you? That look pretty good? Well, if that isn't particular, we could also heat up some of this if you like soup better. Or maybe you brought something from home. Maybe you'd like to heat up some cocoa or something else. And here we have a water dispenser. And down below that, we have an ice box. Now, at the same time, they put ice in the dining car and they put ice in the lounge car. Well, they put a 50-pound block of ice down here for us. And all of our sandwiches are kept nice and cool in the ice box. Don't you worry about much. Oh, yes, you're going to be in this car 8 to 12 hours, and eventually you're going to look for a little room. I wonder what little room you might be looking for. Oh, maybe it's this room right here. Okay, so yeah, it's so we have everything we need, every convenience we need to work in this car. And over here we have a coat closet. Put your coat and any personal belongings over here. Well, now that you've been through the railway post office car, I encourage you to visit the other exhibits here at the California State Railroad Museum, and do enjoy your day here.
Thanks so much, Don. And I saw some people making their way up here. All right, we're going to head on out back to our roundhouse. And those are the only 2 exhibits that we're going to walk through today. But keep tuning in to the Port's home learning programs this summer for different adventures in your state parks. And in future Ports, we will show off some of the other exhibits that we have here at the Railroad Museum. We are open every day. So if you are in the Sacramento area, we are in Old Sacramento State Historic Park. And we hope that, as Don said, you can come here and visit us in person. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.